Hey guys, Akariss here, and it's finally here. Our brand new Divine Code Part 2 is at long last here, and with that, tons and tons of things to consider before we get a bunch of these codes, before we can make some pretty sound decisions on how exactly you want to pull a bunch of fodder from here. So this is going to be quite a long-winded video, and strap in because we definitely have a lot to cover. Enjoy, folks. Alright guys, so welcome to the Divine Code Part 2 video. I'm going to try to make this one full video as opposed to last year when I covered Part 1 codes, where I split it into two parts. Instead, I'll cover basically everything in this video that I can feel is relevant for you guys. I'm going to try to explain the system first, and then we'll cover the paths individually, and then a couple of strategies in which you may want to consider in terms of how you choose to play the game, okay? So this will be quite a long video. I'm going to go through all the paths and where I think you should consider spending your codes or obviously not spending your codes. So first thing I want to talk about is, of course, what are code 2 versus code 1. There's a full code 1 video on what I feel you should invest to for code 1. I'm going to have that as a little clickable up here and of course in the description below, so go watch those videos as well because they definitely tie into this. They will. And on top of that, not really much has changed. I mean, there's still some really good fodder from part 1 codes that isn't really here in part 2 codes. For example, close counter is not in part 2 here, so that's still that made that path a little bit better as reference. But regardless, okay, so Code 1 and Code 2. Everything that was a Code 1 reward is now a Code 2 reward. So I believe that was like Mjolnir Strike, Resident Battles, Arena, and Ether Raids. I might be missing something, there's probably more, but essentially all your Code 1 rewards now became Code 2 rewards with the release of 2. If you want to complete anything from the first path of codes, you actually need to use your first path of codes for number 1s, and the remaining will be taken from part 2. Therefore, it's very important that you kind of know what exactly you really want from part 2 codes, because I feel like the quality of this stuff has gotten better, and using part 2 codes for part 1 is generally lower quality. Okay, folks? By the way, credit for this image and to user Dual Rogue from Reddit. Thank you so much. That is a great image, saves me a lot of time from having to produce this video. So that's credit to you, my friend, from Reddit. Thank you. Anyways, so the income of these codes, I would say generally for the average person, should be around 800 to 1,000 codes per month. So if you actually wanted to target a full path, you are likely looking at about 6 months, half a year to complete a full path. It's very important that you kind of consider that because you can't get everything. And on top of that, if this is a precedent for future paths, part 3, it means that you definitely will not finish everything and there will be more and probably better things to come down the road. But this also means we're going to have so much fodder to choose from and so many different ways you could look at it. Okay guys, so plenty to go through. Hopefully this video helps you make decisions based on how you play the game. Alright, so let's start taking a look. Now, if you forget what's on here or you want to cross-reference it to the other stuff, I'm going to have a very nice slideshow below me interpreting the codes, just sliding back and forth to see what there is available. But I'm going to start with the top code, with the top path, which is 3 houses, I believe. Now, I feel like this path is definitely your best option for Arena or AR Defense. And the reason for that is because you have the Rally Plus from Annette, but the Ruse is also really good for Arena. And at the end, you have Byleth there giving Ruptured Sky and Distant Counter. Really good fodder for Arena. That doesn't mean it should only be used for Arena, because definitely the other stuff here is more AR defense oriented. Sturdy Impact is a great AR defense skill. Attack Speed Push 4 and Low Speed Defense are definitely AR defense oriented skills. They can be used in other stuff too, like PvE content, not too bad. But generally speaking, I feel like this path is best suited for the player who wants Arena or ARD improvements. Okay, next up we have the Arena and ARO path. This one has a Rally Plus at the beginning and Fortune Bow. plus sabotage attack. Now you can't get everything here, but you can actually get quite a bit of things. I feel like sabotage are going to start showing up on GHBs now because Solon came with sabotage res, so it might not be that important to pick up sabotage attack, but the rally plus and fortune bow, definitely nice things. Fortune bow is like the opposite to Tamari, which I believe fortune bow lowers defense and res, so that's really nice to give yourself more of a boost. You got ground orders and bridal fjorm here, or potentially a +1 if you have a bridal fjorm already. And finally, the fallen male Corin, close call, spendthrift, plus another rally plus at the end. So there is a lot of arena fodder here from the beginning to the end. I would say that close call is definitely like a more arena speed damage reduction skill. It's okay in Aether Raid's offense, not that great in Aether Raid's defense, but definitely arena oriented, because being able to like hit and run something plus getting that speed damage reduction is huge. Someone like Hannah really appreciates that. Spendthrift bow isn't actually as amazing anymore, just because Pledgian bow just came out recently with Raphael, and he'll probably come back. Plus, in the future, I suspect that we might get him as non-seasonal weapons. So even though Spendthrift is still fairly good and worth the inherit, I wouldn't necessarily go all in for that. The appeal of this path is definitely like the null follow-up speed solo for effect, the rally plus for arena, and potentially ground orders for defense. But that's pretty much all you get out of defense here. Moving on, we have this path, which I feel is probably most suited for AR offense, and that's probably it. I'm not really too keen on a lot of this stuff because it's mostly like fighter skills. I mean, you have 3 units here who are basically armors. So Bold Fighter, Vengeful Fighter, and Crafty Fighter, and they're all good in their own ways, different places, but generally speaking, most of these skills are best used in AR offense. So this in defense 4, so Sparrow 3 for a PvE type unit, and 4 defense res, likely for soaking. These are all good skills to use for arena for scoring. Generally it's okay, but I think that AR offense, there's definitely a lot of units that use them. And finally the kicker here at the end being Shinnon, and I'm going to cover him and this path probably in general later on when we talk about strategies. But yeah, Shinnon is probably like literally the best thing you can get out of all of the paths. But he's 6,000 codes at the end, so that's a hefty cost. Okay, next up is this path, which again, I feel is an AR offense oriented path. And the reason for that is because you have your Null Sea Disrupt in the middle here with Fallen Leon. Even Pulse Tie is better for AR offense on a support than it is on AR defense, because on turn 1, the enemies don't have their specials charged, but on turn 2 they would have. So on your second turn, you will start disabling specials, which is really nice for even Pulse Tie. And Attack Speed Link is still seasonal locked for whatever reason. So basically most of these skills here are really good on AR offense, while the final thing here on Guinevere I would say is more of a like an AR defense type of fodder, but mostly this whole path is AR offense. Okay, and we have this path here, which is more like a mix of AR offense and defense. Technically at the end you have Harsh Command Plus in the form of like arena fodder, but I'm not convinced that that's how you should use Brigid. Steady Impact is really good for AR defense. Pulse Smoke is an AR offense skill. And then the real beauty is Ethlin here with the AR defense attack speed and potentially Courtly Fan. You couldn't pick up both, but either of those skills are really good on AR defense, considering like Courtly Fan can be mixed with like Wind Sweep, and any dagger unit can kind of run that. You have your Null Follow-Up, which is great for AR offense. Mirror Stance 3, which is probably better for something like Arena, but it's still really good on AR offense for someone like Fallen Leon and even newly refined regular Leon as well. Sophia, those kind of units definitely appreciate that. And finally, Air Orders I think is really nice on AR defense if you have a bunch of flyers who can take advantage of that. Mostly a pretty mixed path here, but not necessarily the most focused. And finally at the end here we have this path, which I'm gonna like tell you right away is the dud of the all paths. You don't really want to spend many codes here because you're just not getting a lot of stuff. So the first thing is on Conrad, which is like a sturdy impact effect for melee swords, which is kind of whatever, because honestly, if you want to run a melee sword, let's say on AR defense, it should be someone like Elwood who already has an impact effect, or the other really good options like Sword Heart or Sigurd, who also like just already have good weapons and don't need that. So it's fairly useless. Warding Stance 4 is like not really comparable to what the previous path had with Mirror Stance 3. And then I'd say like the middle is pretty nice here with Harsh Command 4, Attack Speed Bond 4, Harsh Command Plus, and Aerobatics. That's probably the like sweet spot because it doesn't cost that many codes. That would be 2,400. And at the end, it's something really good in the form of Spurn, Joint, Drive, Attack, but I don't think 6,000 codes for what you get here is worth it at all. This is definitely like the worst path. If I was to rank these codes, before we talk into more in-depth strategy on like how you should approach these codes and not just like complete them, I'm gonna kind of go through it. First, I want to review all of them again really quickly. So we have this one for Arena or Air Defense, this one for Arena and Air Offense, Air Offense mostly, Air Offense mostly, Air Offense, Air Defense, and finally both Air Offense and Defense. Now, what I want to touch again on here is all of it overall, okay? So this is kind of funny because at the end here, the bottom path is literally a bottom, okay? Don't pick that one. I don't think it's worth going through it. You're not going to have the codes and you're not really going to get much out of that. If I was to say the most well-rounded path here, it's probably the Midori path, the Heroes Awakening Fates one, because you just kind of get skills for like everything in the game, okay? You have scoring, you have air offense, arena, and air defense through ground orders. That's a really well-rounded path. If you're not really sure where to spend codes, you probably shouldn't spend the codes first of all, but if you're kind of unsure, you're probably going to get a lot out of that path than anything else here. If I was to put like a second really good path, it's probably the Jug Drill path, where you have just like, again, a mix of kind of everything. You got the air orders for defense, potentially steady impact, you got your rally plus, some really good air defense tech through like Ethlin and Null Follow-Up or Mirror Stance 3 for offense. So those two are like the most well-rounded paths and likely what a lot of people should look at, likely completing. But to make things a little bit more focused here, I'm definitely gonna recommend certain strategies that you should consider and not just complete paths, okay? So this is where things get interesting. Because there's so much good quality fodder early on in the paths, you actually want to be a little bit more strategic how you approach this. Okay, so first up, this path. This one has what I would call like the arena score acceleration path. 1,600 codes gets you 2 rally pluses. Just by starting the Ana and getting to a net, just 1,600 codes is fairly easy. Like this is gonna basically be a month and a half and you got yourself 2 rally pluses, which you can really help with your arena scoring. A very simple strategy that I think most people should likely consider if you really want to get a head start there on your scoring. And remember, the Fates Awakening path is good anyways, and you likely would complete it as we consider the additional strategies here. So next up is the air defense needs help kind of picks. Now here's where I wanted to talk on Selena, because Selena from Fire Emblem 8, by the way, Sacred Stones, okay? Those of you who watched the previous video know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so this one, like I said, you started a Fates Awakening path with Ana, and then you get ground orders off of Bridal Fjorm as the second option. That is really good. Like that is one of the most important skills you can have on air defense. And then if you want to make it a lot better, you would go down the Jug Drill path, looking at like air orders, potentially Flashing Blade 4 Null Follow-Up, and of course the ARD skill on Ethlin or Courtly Fan. That will drastically get you the most value for air defense out of, I think, any other path or trying to complete anything in general. This is very powerful. Now, the next thing you should highly consider, of course, is AR offense. Now, in AR offense, if you're struggling there, I like to call this strategy the air offense in 2 minutes, because if you pick up all these things here, you can create yourself like a super unit or potentially more than one super unit. So as a good contrast to something like Selena, we have Norn here, and I think most people probably have heard of or know about Norn. With Norn, you don't have to use Spendthrift Bow, because something like Pledging Bow should become available by the time you finish a path like this or the combination of these paths, and you can kind of build your own Norn. Norn is actually still very good. She's still aged pretty well, and I don't see her falling off unless they literally copy paste a new unit with the same stat line. And even then, because she has access to 10 flowers versus a new unit which would have 5 flowers, I still don't see her falling off, and your investment will hold some ground for a while to come. Now, as you can actually tell, even in the third strategy here, you're basically going down the Fates Awakening path again, because again, like it's just very well rounded and combines with other paths to get you a lot of stuff here. Now the kicker is of course Fallen Corn providing solo 4 and null follow-up. You will need a solo 3 linker to get both, but it is worth it so you can create a super Norn. Now, if you go down the other path here, which is the Sacred Stones and Binding Blade, Blazing Blade path, just into it a little bit, trying to target the Null Sea Disrupt there, you can create basically a full package for air offense. So something like Norn with a null follow-up, a great tank, and then you have something like Sophia or regular Leon with Null Sea Disrupt, creates very good strategic options for conquering most teams in air offense. Would recommend. Okay, and finally... You hate Claude. Okay, I'm gonna call this the hating Claude route, which is literally just completing the Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn path, because you can create your own counter to Claude doing this. So just go down the path here, pick up Shannon, inherit that to like George here with B-Dual Infantry 4 if you have it, but if you don't, it's fine. It's only a small upgrade for him. You give him Times Pulse and Deadeye, and you win against every single Claude. You'll never have to worry about him again. But that build isn't strictly just for Claude. I mean, George is actually really good even against all other matchups using that combination. He can use Times Pulse and Deadeye, and he doesn't take any sort of score hit. So I think if you really wanted, like you really wanted to be successful in Arena, then you might want to consider like the Shin'en path just to be able to conquer a lot of options. Now you can definitely do this with the archers too. I feel once we have C-Dual Infantry 4, which should happen soonish, you can basically build your own archer at that point, kind of doing the same thing with Times Pulse and Deadeye. However, you will need a Slaying Bow or a character who has Slaying Bow preference, like Niles or Rebecca, and you'll have a pretty good time. So yeah, that pretty much covers the strategies, the paths, everything as I think here. Definitely help you get started on the paths. There's probably way more paths, way more strategies that you guys can even think of, and I would love to hear what you have to say on this, because I'm actually really excited how this turned out, what sort of options we have. There's definitely some missing things here, like for example, we don't have a close counter. Distant counter is still at the end, and generally speaking, I would have loved more ARD stuff like Dozla or Sigrun, but unfortunately maybe that'll come down like next year's paths. Either way, be careful how you choose to use these, because by the end of this year and we start beginning with part 3, I suspect that most players would likely finish 2 or maybe 3 paths, maybe somewhere between 2, maybe all the way close to 4, depending on Feb Pass, how much content you digest and finish. So be careful what you choose to do, because you're not going to be able to get everything, and you should be targeting certain fodder that rounds out your units, your barracks, and any other things like game that you're basically playing for, whatever mode that might be. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped you kind of figure out what you want to do. I am definitely excited about it, and will likely be it's like taking the Fates Awakening Heroes path. Like that like at least most of it will be really good to have, but I'm gonna combine it with a lot of other stuff that I need. Okay guys, thank you for watching. Give the video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you have any other strategies or ideas on how you want to approach some of these paths. And with that being said, sub to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one. Much love. Peace.